Hello, everybody. This is Stephanie from the Canadian Schoolhouse, and I have got Diane Geerlinks with me today from GeerLINKS Educational Therapy and Consulting. So our content theme this whole month, so we put out a whole bunch of different articles on learning differences like dyslexia. So it was so wonderful that Diane was able to join us because she is an expert in unique learners and dealing directly with dyslexia and some other things, but I'm going to let her mainly share about that. So Diane, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So first off, why don't you just go in and let our viewers know about a little bit about you and your background and your connection to homeschooling and how that works in your work and your personal life.
Sure. I'm thrilled to be here. And I would say I am just a mom. First of all, I'm a mom who homeschooled our own kids for 25 years. We have 5 children. And learning, they all learn differently. As you know, we have unique learners all around, but sometimes we have unique learners. And that's what happened, I guess, for me, most specifically with our 5th child, when I was like, what in the world? Why is it taking this child so long to learn to read? And, of course, as a mom, the first thing you do is go back to what am I doing wrong? And maybe I just haven't spent enough time with him and, all the other blame things we do as homeschool moms. But he learned differently. Sounds were always difficult for him. Learning to read was hard for him. I tried many different curriculums, as we all do. I tried many different strategies. How else could I try to teach this thing? I was a hands-on learner and a hands-on teacher, so we did lots of things hands-on, and yet there was some struggle. And so when he was diagnosed way too late at age 15, when I finally got him diagnosed, then he had auditory processing disorder, which we can talk about how that relates to dyslexia. But that was a real eye-opener and a relief, I think, for him and for I. But at that point is when I trained with NILD Canada as an educational therapy, because what was I going to be when I grew up out of homeschooling? And so I trained, and that's when we started opening our practice, GeerLINKS Educational Therapy. That is the history.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. I do know a little bit about your professional background, so it was so nice to hear about your homeschooling background as well, and especially with 5 kids. I mean, I've got 2 I'm homeschooling, and even those 2 are a little bit different, but that comes out even more, especially having 5 children, where you see how they're really unique. I mean, even if they're not real diagnosable learning challenges, just the way the brain works is not really the same for the most part, not even all of our own children, right? But really different for.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So you have written an article recently. You have written an article that we posted along with all our great content we did this month for learning differences, called "The Gift of Learning." The gift of homeschooling children with dyslexia. And I really enjoyed that article. In fact, I find that as well, that these learning differences, again, trying to get away from the word disorders or even challenges sometimes is a little bit limiting to say that. It's really just different ways that kids learn. And it's really nice to be able to enjoy them for what they are. So your article definitely shared a lot that, and I think Christine has probably already popped that in the comments, the link to Diane's article on our website. But can you tell us a little bit about your experience of working with dyslexic learners?
Yeah, and I would say when you talk about, the article, the title of the article, I specifically titled it Homeschooling. Homeschooling is the gift. That's what I mean with it is for your dyslexic learners, homeschooling is the gift, because it can be unique, because it's different. Yes, dyslexia can be a gift because they have many, many strengths, but the homeschooling part is just exactly what they need. And so that's a really beautiful thing for us as homeschoolers. So yeah, I guess in my experience, we've, had different students in my own family, as I said, in my own child, but in our practice that have had dyslexia. Now, the term dyslexia has changed over time-ish, meaning that dyslexia has been known for a long, long time. We know that the actual meaning is difficulty with reading. But it has all kinds of connotations. And so people will often say, well, my kids, I think I have dyslexia because it's so difficult to read. And that's good thinking. How you really know, of course, is with assessment. And the assessment, so as a diagnosis, they don't use that word so much anymore. The diagnosis is specific learning disorder with impairment in reading expression, in phonemic awareness. So it's a more specific diagnosis, which really helps us as interventionalists to be able to help them more specifically.
Okay, so why don't you give a few tips to some of our parents watching here today about identifying how they can maybe identify some of those learning challenges within their own children, so in their own home, and then maybe even give a little bit about how you might do that as a professional, just assessing different children for learning challenges.
Yeah, for that word. As you know, children develop and learn as they grow. And, it's not like one day you said, okay, today's the day we're going to start to read. And so dyslexia comes as having difficulty with reading. Well, do you say that when they're 3? Do you say that when they're 4? Do you say it when they're 5? There are signs along the way to say, oh, they always had difficulty with nursery rhymes or memorizing a song, and they never, it was just really difficult for them. So that might be one of the warning signs, or a little bit of a flag, or a little bit of a caution marker, I sometimes call them, to say, that's interesting. This child still can't memorize that. Or maybe there's speech. For my son, it was his speech. He always said things a little differently. And people would say to me, aren't you worried about that? And I'd be like, nah, I'm a homeschooler and I've been doing this for a while and he's going to get it. It's fine. But now that I look back and I know what I know, I can say, oh, those were little markers along the way to say, oh, he was really having trouble hearing the different sounds. And so that would be another thing to look for. Or learning and remembering letters. Like in our homeschools, letters are around us. We have signs up, we have books out, we talk about them. And so if a child, you've done this for a while, you've opened a 3-year-old curriculum, or 4, whatever, 5, depending on what you do as a homeschooler, you've exposed them to it, but they just aren't connecting and remembering the letters. And you're like, that's just weird. Like, my other child just did this. So why is it hard? So that's one of them. Connecting letters to sounds. I talked about that. Maybe guessing words when they're reading, like they don't look at that first letter and are able to sort of, a short word like cat, nap, they're not connecting that when they're in kindergarten and grade 1. That would be another thought. Leaving out words as they get to grade 2 and following, it's usually they leave out words that are in a sentence, or they're not fluent in their speech even, so it's difficult for them to express themselves. And so you're kind of finishing their sentences for them. Or they confuse words like tornado, volcano, like they know the word, but they can't quite retrieve what the word is. So I guess that's naming the days of the week. Those are all kind of early signs. They can't remember the days of the week. And you're like, wow, we've been doing this. And some of your kids just picked it up because you said it a few times, right? So that's one way in being able to look at identification. Sometimes dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia gets kind of lumped because some of them, the characteristics overlap. So the trouble with reading, the trouble with writing, the trouble with math, sometimes are overlapped. And we then look at, we in our therapy, and our intakes are looking at, where are these struggles? So why? My question always is, what's the why? Why is this so difficult for them? So it's not like you can say, well, they can't read, so we're not going to worry about reading. We want to say, oh, so why is reading so difficult? And what can we do then to help them? And I'm always looking for, is it the eyes? Is there a visual? What about the memory? Is it the ears? Where is the breakdown that is making this such a challenge for the student? Yeah. I mean, in reading, I guess my biggest thing is that so often we've thought, reading will just happen. If we expose them to really good literature, if we expose them to our library, which as homeschoolers, that's our passion, that's what we love, they will just learn it. But sometimes they don't. And we're like, really? And that's what I was feeling like. Why? I'd say to my husband, like, of course, it was always blame the mom. So I blame myself. Like, I just hadn't spent enough time with the child. If only I would, had done more of this in this curriculum. I mean, we can think of 1,000 reasons to blame ourselves. But then, in our discussions, it's like, hang on, he has grown up in a language-rich environment with books and reading and oral reading and novels, discussions and talking, and yet reading's a struggle, right? So that's really where we're looking at. And so in our therapies, we are always looking at, okay, where the problem is, and then let's work on that foundation to build it strong.
Mm-hmm. I'll say that, when you talk about that difference, I've got a 10 and a 13-year-old, and the 13-year-old is so I've never had him assessed or anything like that. And let's put a thought on that, and you can, because there is that question a lot, how important is an assessment or a diagnosis in that? But I will say that my older son, that one that's 3 years older than my other one, his reading is a struggle, even his reading out loud. Like, he's just, even at 13, he's still not really fluent. And I will say I'm not worried about it. However, it's an area that I know I want him to, for one thing, get practice in that reading. And I do look for things, especially finding different articles or different tips, just in ways that I can find. And, for me, I keep thinking, well, it's just the way his brain's working. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but a little bit of what you're saying is, as somebody that's assessing children, we just need to figure out how it is that their brain's working. And then we can maybe give them a path for how to learn more effectively or efficiently, maybe is the better word.
For sure. And that's, I think, where we as homeschoolers, in the history of homeschooling, because of course, the hair is showing that I've been around a while, 25 years of homeschooling and then training. But we as homeschoolers have kind of pushed away this, every kid's going to learn at their own pace. So therefore, we shouldn't assess them. And I myself did that too, until I became desperate. And I would say that it's a good thing to have at least a general assessment, if not a specific assessment, to be able to say, okay, how does my kid learn best? So that I can support them and help them. And, many of the parents I talk to in my consulting practice is, I have to talk to them about, we're going to have to change curriculum here. And I know that's hard for moms, because you have to learn a whole new thing. And for me, it was like 5 years of doing it this way. Do I want to change? No, but my child needs me to change. Right. So that whole piece. of assessment is really important, I think, because it helps us understand. And so when we're talking identification, we want to identify the struggle, name it, and then be able to find things to support it. And I liken it to anything that we live with in our lives. Like, yes, we learn different, but if you have a disease of any sort, a problem, and you go to your doctor, you can't say, well, I'm different. So I'm just different, and I just walk different. That's just the way I walk. And he may say, but it would be good to find out what's going on so that we can improve your walking. And I think that's what we want for our kids, is want to say, we can say, well, they just learn differently. Yes, but what's wrong with saying, so let's figure out how you learn different, so that I can help you learn more easily. Because, sorry, I could preach forever, but because our kids,
good information.
Our kids so desperately want to succeed. And when they can't succeed or achieve this, they feel like they're stupid and their self-esteem plunges. And that's the fine line between to test or not to test. That's the question, I would say. To test or not to test. The question is, how is this going to affect your child?
Yeah, so in that we all have unique learners. So whether there might be something to assess and maybe put a label on it just for the benefit of knowing, right? Or so can you tell us how we can customize our homeschool learning for our unique learners? So you have shared a little bit about ways to doing that, changing curriculum, and I've had to do that myself. And I found a curriculum I love. My brain is completely different than both my boys, and then actually each of my boys, they can't do all the same stuff. It just doesn't. As I said, one's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenged with reading and comprehending that information while he's reading, where the other one can read like even just today was saying, I just finished this book in 3 days, right? And it's which is, he just got into the book and read it, where I'm not sure if my older one will ever do that. He does read, though. He does have books to regularly read.
Good.
So just tell us.
Absolutely.
Give a little bit of direction.
Absolutely. I would say, as we're customizing homeschooling, and we're thinking about dyslexia in particular, I look to the International Dyslexia Association. And the International Dyslexia Association is the guru into what should we do and how do we help students that have difficulty with reading. And their biggest thing is explicit instruction. So they talk about structured literacy, which means we have to teach our kids. So we, maybe even your generation, has come out of a system that was thinking, we're looking whole language, we're thinking, look at the context of the picture, but we're not, even now, today, in our school systems, we have kind of put away a lot of the phonetics, and in the International Dyslexia Association says it has to come back. So when I say what to do, the International Dyslexia Association says these kids, all children, these kids in particular, need explicit instruction. And that means teaching them the phonics, teaching them the rules, even though you and I are like, why all these rules? They need it more than ever because they need something to hook on so that they can do their learning. And so this explicit instruction means step by step by step. It has to be that way. And so I would suggest homeschooling, again, is wonderful for this because we can find curriculum that's explicit, has explicit instruction, and go through it. And if it means it takes longer, then it takes longer. But we can go through it step by step. And some of those, so what to look for is an Orton-Gillingham approach, which is recommended by them. So something that has an Orton-Gillingham approach, the Barton program has that. NILD, so the National Institute for Learning Development, which I also wear that hat. That's where I trained with. Their program is specific in this area of explicit instruction. And then a practical one for homeschoolers is all about reading or all about spelling. And so that program is Orton-Gillingham based and does meticulously and explicitly go through all the stages. So I think number one is you really have to keep going through the stages of reading. And so my 15-year-old at that point, he could read. He just couldn't read to be able to answer the questions in a book and understand what he was reading and then be able to spit it out again in an answer. And so my whole thinking was, what are we going to do? And he goes off to college. I know I'm going to go with him because how else is he going to learn? And so I was like desperate to find him help. I think I'm done with high school when I'm finished.
You didn't want to go to college or university?
I was like, I think I'm done. But yeah, so that piece of, really having him understand, I mean, even at that age, he ended up going for NILD Educational Therapy. I trained, thought I would work with him, but afterwards thought, I've had enough. I'll pay somebody else to work with him. But they went right back to the short vowel sounds, the long vowel sounds, all the different sounds that the letters make and why, and how we know which one to use when, all those. So even though he could read, we backed it up. And I think that shows us as homeschoolers. So in answer to your question, you may have to get a new program and back it up so that do they really understand it? Because those are the pieces that come together. Another part I think as my tips is, the best way to learn is mediation. And that's again a wonderful way why homeschooling works. And that is back and forth discussion, right? It's not giving them the answer because homeschoolers are quick. Homeschool moms, okay, I'm pointing at myself, was quick to supply the answer. I don't want it to be difficult for my child. But the answer, the best thing to do is to pull back and give them time. So we call it the 3-second rule. Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Just making sure I'm not on.
Oh, sure. I don't hear any on my end, just if you're wondering, but that can be hard on your end to talk properly.
I've turned mine off, but okay. So where was I? So the mediation, holding back, the 3-second rule, to be able to say, I'm going to give them, just when I'm about to help, count to 3. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes their processing is just a little bit slower and they will come up with the answer. But there is a thing called learned helplessness. And that means they've just learned to be helpless and wait for you to give them the answer. And so we as parents need to stop, let them think, expect an answer from them, because very often then they just look to you like, I don't know is their favorite word. Because that just means if they say, I don't know, then that means you're going to help them. So being able to stop and say, no, you have to give me something. So in our therapy sessions, I say, you have to give me something. I don't care if it's right or wrong or if it's totally out of context, but you have to say something. So
that's a very good tip.
We all need it.
A very good tip, like especially for me in my life. Like as you mentioned that, I'm thinking very much with my both of them in different areas actually, but I I find myself quickly and even sometimes and not always giving the answer. I think I've trained myself a little bit to at least not give the answer, but even sometimes to, as you say that, I'm like, yeah, maybe I just need to like be silent, because I might then try to pose it in a different way and try, like, because in my mind, I'm trying to get the brain, like, engaging with whatever I might be, right? So I think, oh, well, if I just say it a little bit differently, then maybe he'll know, right? And I wonder if that's always the best thing in retrospect.
Well, and especially if your child has auditory processing disorder, which a lot of students with dyslexia do have hearing processing areas of weakness because they didn't understand the sounds. So if you think about it moving up in the grades. But when you repeat the question in a different way, now they have to process that new way. If you use, my son used to say, when you talk, it sounds like blah, blah, blah. Which, the Charlie Brown, blah, blah, blah. Because I use too many words. And for his auditory processing, by the time I was finished, you forget what I was talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
I'm totally guilty of that.
So that's just because that's what we do. But now to take a step back. You might repeat it the same way. You might say, what did I say? Ask them to clarify. Because how many of us have said a direction to our kid, and then we say, you're just not listening. If you'd listen to me. But they really are listening. They're just not hearing and processing what you said, and they've forgotten by the time you finished your rant. I'm speaking as a homeschool mom now. Your rant.
Yeah, I'm very relatable to the rant. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think the other little
it's wonderful. You've given us lots.
The other tips.
Sorry, you go on with that other tip.
Okay, movement. If you know me at all, if I've read any of my posts, if you follow me at all, I'm the movement queen or the midline queen. There's so many connections going on in our brain, and in order to read, it is, Dr. Marianne Wolf calls it like the circus with these trapeze artists coming from all different angles of the brain in order to pull this thing called reading together. It involves spelling. Spelling is an important part of reading. Even though we want to say, oh, they can't even read it, forget about spelling. They need to read. Reading and spelling are connected. It helps them understand. Anyway, so back to the movement piece. We need to cross midline. We need them to, can they go from one side to the other? Can they balance on a balance beam? I'm giving you tastes of many of my workshops, but the importance of getting them up off their chair or having them stand at the chalkboard to write as opposed to sitting on their desk with their legs swinging is a really important part of their learning development. And it's really hard. Can you imagine sitting on a chair that you can't touch the ground? Your legs are swinging because their chairs are too big, and we're trying to write, and you got to keep within the line, right? There's so much going on in our body. So that's the first part of movement. And the second part is they need so many breaks. So I would say to my son, okay, go, if he'd look at me exasperated, okay, go do 5 basketball hoops when he's 14. You can't stay out for 2 hours, but go do that, then come back. We'll try again. And then thirdly, when the brain shuts down because it shut down for whatever reason, you used a tone that they thought meant you were mad at them. You you were just getting frustrated. And so, I mean, that would happen. I would say something and I didn't think I was mad, but he could pick up on my 6 times 7, like, you're asking me that again, even though I didn't say that. And once they've shut down, it's your learning is over. The amygdala in the middle of your brain is just too hot and fiery. And so we know that that's the time to be able to pull back and have them have a break in order to carry on.
Yeah, breaks are one of those things I try to. Actually, I shouldn't say I try to. The boys naturally just take breaks, even though they're individual learning at our house, right? So there's lots of stuff they can just do with their own, and then they ask me for help should they need it. And then so I'm trying to be a little bit lax on that about, like, okay, they can have a break, even though they've only been working half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just let them have a break. Not for 2 hours, but a little bit of a break.
Giving them a list, put the learning, especially in that age, put the learning onto them so they know this is what has to happen today. And they're already building that executive function piece of learning, of getting their stuff done.
Yeah. So that's great. It was so wonderful to hear from you directly. And I know I've seen you at a few conventions. I've seen you're listed as a speaker at a few conventions. And even though we're not doing them live right now, I've seen you a few virtually. So just that you're a speaker and really presenting yourself. I'm sure some of our viewers have seen you if they've been out at conventions as well, homeschool conventions.
Maybe we'll
but I do want to say too,
again.
when I was researching, yes, one day soon, that we were that when I was researching, just because we were going to have you on here, right? I went to your website. Like, there is such a wealth of information on Diane's website, Homeschoolers. So really go there. I mean, she's giving great information right now, but go to her website and see the various things she has there, just to give you that bit of direction, and definitely a help for that, as well as any kind of assessment or like consulting and therapy that you do. But just even going on her website and getting familiar with just homeschooling your unique learner is you're going to find a lot at GeerLINKS.
We do have. I do have a Facebook. There is a Facebook group. I think she's put it in the comments, but it's a Facebook group it's a closed group it's called Homeschooling Your Unique Learner in Canada. And so we do have a good number of members there of people that have unique learners or think they might have. And so then we share ideas as well in that group. So we'd be happy to help if you have any other questions.
That's excellent. Yeah, I didn't find that Facebook group before. I know you mentioned it before we went live here, so I'm glad we got that link for our viewers to be able to see that. So that's right in the comments there for anybody that wants to view, whether you're watching us live or whether you're watching the recording. You'll be able to see those links there. If you're on Facebook, you're going to see the links right along with the post, but YouTube will have the links in the description after we have it go live. So be sure to check out the links. Diane's article, as I mentioned earlier, about the gift of homeschooling with dyslexic learners. And as well, we also have some other stuff on our site for learning challenges. So you can go and check those out. Christine will pop those links in there. Specifically, we've got homeschooling different learning styles. So that's just an article that's going to share a little bit about learning styles. So something more on how we're all divided into different learning styles. And then it gets even more, specific on other unique ways that we learn. But there are set learning styles that just the whole population is divided into a few of them. And then also coping with dyslexia, which is an article that's a little bit more on just helping your child. So helping that child that is identified as having dyslexia. And that, as I said, I wonder if my son has dyslexia, my older one, and my husband my husband I shouldn't say did. I mean, he still does, I guess. But as you get to be an adult, you learn different ways of learning. But it's really interesting because him being dyslexic and an adult now, I mean, he just never got that foundation of the sounds in there, because even his spelling is not quite right. I mean, he talks fine, but his reading and his spelling just never really got the foundation to, I guess, right? So even now he's just not able. I'm sure he could, if he really took the time. I'm sure he could get that he just doesn't have the desire right now. So it's definitely with my older son there. I just want to make sure he gets that foundation, and I'm gonna really enjoy taking in that into my own home, Diane, what you shared today, because it's so relatable to me personally as a homeschool mom. So thank you.
That's great.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody, for now. And we'll see you in another 2 weeks. We'll have another live stream.